I call the Honourable Rick Barker.
Thank you very much for the recognition, Mr Speaker, and the opportunity to make a contribution to this debate on the Weathertight Homes Bill. Firstly, I want to reiterate what my colleagues have already said, that Labor supports this bill. I want to congratulate the Minister for steering this bill through the House. And like a large number of bills that have gone through this House, it offers good points, but it is not perfect. Not surprising that I haven't seen anything that's been crafted yet that can be considered by all parties as perfect. But let's not look at the world through a glass half empty. Let's look at a world through a glass half full. And I want to pick up on the points made by my colleague Rajin Prasad and re-echo them, that there are many, many people around New Zealand who are incredibly distressed at the state of their buildings. They are incredibly distressed that they have been let down by, as they see it, authorities, by the builders, by architects, and there's been an enormous amount of blame game playing. Now, we've heard some of it this afternoon in the House. The Green Party member, Sue Kedsley, pointed the finger at all and sundry other than the Greens as who was responsible. Well, the Greens can do that, of course. But some people have to take some responsibility for things and get things done. This is a bill which does give some certainty on the way forward. But there is still a lot of uncertainty. And the first one I'd like to raise in this third reading bill is just to describe the size of the problem. As I understand it, there's $11 billion worth of houses involved. $11 billion is a large figure. It's an enormous figure. And when you put that figure beside the cost of the reconstruction of Christchurch, we are effectively doing the job of Christchurch twice over. This is a huge amount of money. It involves a huge number of homes. And it represents in many ways a loss. Because if it's a cost, it's a loss. And we're looking at a loss of $11 billion in Christchurch, say, $11 billion in leaky homes, multi-hundreds of millions of dollars of loss in finance companies which have gone broke. New Zealand has suffered a significant hit in a short period of time with leaky homes, Christchurch and the financial crisis. But we have to dig ourselves out of the hole, and this represents in part our way forward. As my colleagues have said, there are some issues around this. Whose eligibility? There are always going to be issues at the margin. The member, Chris Ockenvold, spoke and said, explained why the 10 years was there. Well, I have to say to the member, the moment you draw a line, then some people are in and some people are out. Now, this means that some people are going to be out, and they will feel aggrieved. Well, the Honourable Minister Maurice Williamson holds up his fingers and has a little bit apart. Missed just by that much, yes, just by a small amount. So there's going to be some people who miss. And again, looking at the glass half full, this is going to address the bulk of the problems for the bulk of the people. But this legislation is going to have some people that are going to be outside of it. This legislation has also got other issues on how to deal with multiple ownership properties. There's a threshold that has to be met of 75%. Now, what happens if you get 72 or 73%? Then the majority are held at the whim of the minority. That's right. Not seen as democratic in most accounts, but that's what we are going to have with this legislation. And there does not seem to be a pathway forward of how to reconcile the differences between the majority, say 66%, which is two-thirds, and the other third. But it's another issue we might have to come back to as well. Then the bill is going to rely on its implementation with the cooperation of local authorities and the banks. And the Minister has been very good in explaining what the legislation does, but we haven't heard a lot yet about the attitude of the banks. The banks have talked about goodwill and about constructive engagement and so on, but that does not amount to a guarantee or an undertaking. The Minister says the banks have all signed up. Well, that's a very good thing, and I'm pleased to hear that. But the other problem that I come back to with this has been, with this bill, is that the legislation is all right in having one way, but you have to have the means to carry it out. And the means to carrying it out is having a skilled workforce to undertake the work. There's very little point in having the legislation and the technical pathway forward, but it's another means of having the means to implement it. In one way, it's that, look at it, we have the plan, we have the strategy, but we don't have the technical resources to supply it. Now, one of the national members made light of this and said, well, if there is a problem, it's got to be the Labor government's problem, because they were in before. Well, I want to say to them that isn't a good enough answer, in my opinion. It's not good enough because it's wrong, and it's not good enough because pointing the blame at people and blaming others is not a responsible attitude to this piece of legislation. I want to re-echo the points made by Chris Ockenvold, who said this bill is not about apportioning blame. And I think that's a very worthy point to make. But we have to come back to, do we have the technical resources to do this? And it seems to me that if we are going to struggle to get the resources to rebuild Christchurch, we're going to struggle to get the resources to rebuild Christchurch twice over, because that's what this bill represents. And it means that we're going to have a large number of qualified builders, carpenters, we have to have qualified roofers, we're going to have qualified plasterers, plumbers, electricians, you name it. These people are going to have to be available to undertake this work. And any scan of the horizon from this point of view, from this vantage point today, tells me that there is insufficient skills for this. While this leaves from this piece of legislation, the enactment of it, the government, I think, now has a responsibility to go and do something more constructive about upskilling and training young people into the building trades than what they have been doing. The current rate of training and the current rate of upskilling of young people is less than what it was 5 years ago. Less. And it's showing no signs of picking up. The government can point to the fact that they have increased funding, and that is true. But when people point to the increase in funding, which is true, they do not point out that in fact the increase is measured off a base which is lower than what it was previously. So the government's increase in funding for skills and training in the building industry leaves it short, well short of what it used to be. If it's well short of what it used to be and we were struggling to cope then, how are we going to be able to cope when we have two major building projects to be undertaken? The rebuild of Christchurch and dealing with leaky homes. And it is going to be done over a similar and concurrent period. Because once this legislation is through, we're going to see an increase in activity of getting those leaky homes fixed. And we must do that. For all the reasons outlined by Sue Kedsley, I feel ill and queasy when she talks about all the diseases that are in the house. She makes it seem that I want to sort of have a face mask on to protect myself from it. I shudder at it. She's very good at describing that. And people are living in these conditions. And she's quite right. It's not only the threat to one's physical health, it is also the threat to one's mental health. To be living every day watching a person's most significant investment rot and cave in around them must be incredibly distressing. So it is good that this legislation is being passed. It's good that we're getting to the final stage of it. It does offer a pathway forward. It is not complete. That's accepted. It's also accepted in all probability we'll have to come back and do some more in the future. But that's not a debate we want to have now. The fact is the glass is half full. Something constructive is being done. But there is still underpinning this, Mr. Speaker, a fundamental weakness. And that is the very means by which we can give effect to this legislation to fix these homes that these people desperately need. And to fix the homes, we need more than just legislation. We need more than just the bank signing up for the money. We need the people with the shorts, builders' strap belts, hammers and nails out there doing the job. Minister missed it. But they're doing the job. These are people who turn up every day, 7 o'clock in the morning, and work hard. They're great people. They do a great job. But we need many, many more of them. And I think this is the fundamental weakness. And I would like to hear in the future a better plan from the government, not the one they've reiterated, a better plan from the government as to how they're going to upskill the industry and provide us with the skilled tradespeople necessary to construct and rebuild the houses in Christchurch and buy the leaky homes. So Labor will support this legislation, but much more needs to be done.